Well, if he does, it's because he's exploited a frustration and a desperation in people. But what he said to him is, look below you and kick the small guy below you. Don't look above you. And I'll give you a good example of what I mean. The entire traveller accommodation budget, because this started with traveller accommodation, for last year was 12 million, the entire budget. We gave in the same year 67 million to the horse racing industry, the richest industry in the country. Now there's a disparity, and if you wanted to criticise the distribution of the wealth in the country or the supports in the country, then let's look at the corporate supports that are given out to the very, very wealthy as against the minimal supports
If it
that are
works
given
for
out to
him,
the most
though,
vulnerable.
do you think there will be politicians who will sit back and look at that and see him going from 2% to 10% or whatever he ends up on and say, well, that's a way to do it. That is a route to getting electoral support.
I've no doubt there are people out there that would see that as a way to do it, as a route to get elected. But I think it behoves the rest of us to point out these contradictions and not to encourage the idea that you attack the most vulnerable in order to gain popularity for yourself. And that's exactly what he did.
Could it change Irish politics, do you think, Fiona, if he is successful? I don't mean dramatic.
I think the level of debate has been extraordinarily poor. And on the last issue about not knowing how much people on job seekers get, that just shows you there's poor preparation. I mean, you would expect to be primed on things like this if you're going into all these debates, because by the end of the litany of debates, all sorts of questions were being asked. So very poor preparation, very poor level of debate, and no vision, no discussion about the big challenges that we face globally and nationally, like climate change, like the refugee crisis. Absolutely no discussion about the fundamental things that you would expect a presidential ambassador-like person representing this country to have views on. I've loads of views on climate change. Go around this table and you'll hear views on climate change. But where were the views on the big crises
And is that
are
because
facing
of the
the human
candidates, do you
race?
think, or because of the tone,
The
of
tone
the
that
debate?
was set and the candidates.
All right, because it has
Attempts to, I hope we see more attempts to move to a fossil-free energy production, which will mean that jobs will go both in the ESB and Bord na Móna. It's a tragedy for communities to lose so much all in one fell swoop. And at the very least, I would have thought that because it was flagged up and we knew we were going to have to do this at some stage, that they would have already had arrangements set up that workers could be retrained, that they would know what kind of green sustainable jobs they might be able to take up, whether it's in forestry or a different type of farming or the production of green fossil-free fuel, and that they would understand clearly that what they're doing is moving, it's making a very big contribution to this country actually, and in many ways their cooperation with it is heroic insofar as it'll help us move from an absolute addiction to fossil fuel to a fossil-free society, which the IPCC report has showed us we have to do. And we have to do it sooner rather than later. And this is the first move that indicates a determination to do that. But unfortunately, there are 460 odd workers at the brunt of it, and they should be treated with absolute utmost respect, given training, options of re-engagement in clean, green jobs. And as much as possible, the redundancies should be extremely generous because it is an entire community that's been affected. So I think they have all our solidarity and our thanks that they will move along with this move. But I think it would be remiss of both Bord na Móna, the government and all of us not to supply alternative options for them in their lives.
All right.
Interesting. Excuse me. Interesting Fiona says that, because I've never heard Fianna Fáil calling on the Fine Gael government to use their veto over Brexit, for example, and they do have one. And Brexit is supposed to be the most awful thing that's going to happen to us, and yet we have a veto that nobody ever calls for them to use.
How could we veto Brexit?
We have a veto on Brexit. On the backstop, on the hard border. We can veto that as an arrangement between the EU and the rest of us. And it's never been argued for, except by ourselves. And I just think that we cannot see the level of corporation tax and the sort of fundamental way that we've organised our finances as being sustainable. On a globalised scale, they are not sustainable, because what we are doing is depriving large chunks of the planet of resources, and the Oxfam reports show this very, very clearly. And we can't argue for equality and sustainability on a global scale without living up to that. And the only reason that there's a panic over this is the tax itself. But there are other reasons why FDIs come and stay here, not least because of the high degree of educated workforce, the English language, the availability to the European Union market, and things like the database centres that they have to build require more or less cold climate countries.
It comes down to money at the end of the day,
It comes
Brid.
down to money, but they still have other reasons to invest here, and it's not all down to the lower tax rate. Let's see what happens, because the tax rate effectively
you think we should
was brought down to
increase it?
6%, and we got it back up again, and they didn't all leave. The sky didn't fall in. So I don't agree that this is the end of the line for us. And I don't think Seamus is saying that, because he's been talking about this for a long, long time. Now, unless he's saying that this has escalated because of Brexit and we're losing an ally, then maybe is he hinting that we should also leave Europe?
Do we have
and
Seamus
protect
still on
our-
the